Right, recording again. So yeah, I put together a doc for this. I didn't really flesh it out much, but I just wanted to talk about two um, specific issues that we had lately, because what happened with those is that they missed more than one release. So, you know, we emphasize velocity over predictability. We're normally okay with something missing a release, but if something misses a release twice, that says that we presumably did some form of like re-estimation, like checking back in on what we thought the scope was, and then that went wrong again. So the point of this isn't to assign blame, and the reason I kept the number of attendees small was just because I think we can have a more focused conversation that way. But I will record it and I'll post it somewhere probably in the plan retrospective issue and stuff as well, just to talk about that. So the two issues are the dragging and dropping issues in the epic tree and the manual backlog grooming and prioritization. So I don't know if anybody has one that they wanted to talk about first. So Gabe, obviously, you joined recently, you weren't here for when these issues were started. So do either of these jump out at you?
Yeah, I spent some time actually looking through these yesterday, and I think there's a couple things that I found interesting. And I guess this would just be looking at the weights on them is my first thing that I looked at. Of I think the dragging and dropping is 3, which I guess I'm still figuring out our weight tables and how we do that, but that's fairly straightforward, pretty straightforward to implement. There's not a ton of gaps in the requirements, but and reading through some of the issues and the complexities of having epics and sub epics jump from one another, that's became a really complex thing. So I think it's interesting that that didn't come up until it was too late, or right when we got to it, I guess. But I don't know the whole history and timeline of where things actually got stopped up, which is
so yeah. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that 3 weight, because I just looked at that and I was like, I'm pretty sure I added that. So I did add that, and then I did add a comment and said I genuinely don't know how to weight this issue because I don't know what the back end's requiring from the front end here to scope it. So I think we just sort of missed following up and updating the weight there. But yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I think generally when that happens, and that's a good thing to call out, and I think we should do that. I've generally not proceeded with implementation until there's a researcher spike or something to answer that question, just to remove the ambiguity from it, I guess. So
yeah, so we did have a bit of discussion about that.
Yeah. Is there a UX ready label on this issue? I don't see it. I wonder why I'm looking at the right issue. It's 9367, right?
Yes, yeah. So this is the drag and drop epic tree. I think that's probably the more interesting one to talk about first, and it's still ongoing as well, so it'll be fresher in our minds.
It probably doesn't have UX ready because it was originally part of the issue was to sort of implement all of it at once, and then we split out drag and drop, and I probably forgot to add that label.
Gotcha. Yeah,
because it was UX ready on the original issue.
Yeah. I wonder if that should be a workflow label. I know someone made a comment about changing the existing. Was it you, Gabe, who made a comment, or somebody created an issue about changing the workflow labels to better? Because we have the product workflow labels and we have the engineering workflow labels, and should they all just be one set?
Yeah, I did bring that up, and I think that's something that as somebody new coming into the process that exists, it's really confusing for me, just because everything needs proper UX treatment and proper validation. Everything needs proper engineering, and it kind of needs to go through a certain stages. And there's an overlap of UX and engineering to a certain degree, and part of that. But yeah, having all these different labels is confusing because there's not a given workflow that everybody follows, which makes it easy for things to break, right? So like before an issue can go from UX ready to in dev, it needs a wait provided by the people that are going to implement it usually or something. And that's why I think improving the workflow would be a huge first step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when did we break up the other ticket into this ticket? Was it 12.0 or 12.1?
So you mean that we had the epic tree issue, and then we had this one? Is that right?
Yeah.
We also had the roadmap tab was a part of the entire design, and then we split that, and then we added the tree under the feature flag, and now we have the drag and drop. So at least 3 issues. I think if you click on the epic, you should be able to see it.
I think let me link to the epic. So like, I think I'm going to try and validate this now, but I think part of the initial slippage was that the blocking issue didn't ship in the release we thought it would. But I don't remember if that's right. So like the actual tree view itself. Does anybody remember? Does that sound right, or am I just making that up?
That sounds right. I think I remember reading that.
Yeah. So like, this comes after the tree. The tree view is read only. This comes after the tree view to bring it to, I guess, parity with what we have now, except it's more than parity because you can change the nesting of things at the same time as by dragging and dropping them through the tree. But until we have the read-only tree view, we can't do this because there's nothing to drag and drop within. So that's one reason. So this was originally in. So I made a comment in the 29th of May, which means we would have started working on it in May, then June, then July, and we're still working on it in August. So this is 12.2, so that's 12.1, so that's 12.0. So yeah, it's been at least 3 issues. And like, the other day Charlie like added a comment which was very valuable, but like also means like, a huge risk to shipping it, or like a change of scope like later on. So yeah, I mean, Donald, from your perspective, from like the front end side, like, is there anything that sort of comes out to you as like, something we could improve here?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, and we've already mentioned it, but is just reevaluating that weight. Just to start off with, we not so much. Maybe the weight was fine in the beginning, but we didn't go in and change that, which we should have. So that was a miss there. This one, because there was also, I think, some confusion over should this be part of the read only. So the read only is what was behind the feature flag, and that we turned on, and then it's back off again, right?
Yeah, we got a bunch of feedback. We're addressing it, but this is a blocker to us, like making the tree view available again, right? Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. So I think there was also some confusion as far as, so when we turned on the read only and we got feedback, I don't know if on the front end we knew if we should be addressing the feedback first, or if we should be doing, and I know Kushal had listed, maybe it was on the other issue, the other related issue, but just kind of a list of priorities that he should take on. I think this issue was linked to that. Let me see if I can find it.
The feedback, I opened it, or sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
The feedback, we opened a new issue for that. It should be in the Epic, I hope, where I proposed a new layout that addressed the major points that we received, like the hidden tree and the word tree being confusing and other things. So hopefully those on the front end should be really small fixes. It's just rearranging things. I posted a new proposal before I went on vacation, but I'm not actually sure if is Kushal out too?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't checked on it actually, so I should go back and see. But hopefully that should be small. But the current implementation or the current blocker, is that front end related or is it more back end?
I don't think there's a blocker anymore, is there?
So the current issue that Charlie's raised is a back end issue, but that might increase the front ends. So like,
Oh.
it's a trade off, right? Because like at the moment we're saying we can interleave issues and epics, which is complicated on the back end because everything we use for ordering is ordering items of the same type, and here we're not. And I think there was some discussion earlier where Charlie and Brett discussed this and figured out a solution, but then that didn't account for another problem in the way that the ordering works, which we didn't know about until we got further down that line. So my suggestion there was, can we cut the scope and, from this iteration, not allow that interleaving? So always have epics at the top, then issues below if they're at the same level. So you can reorder issues within the issues list and epics within the epics list, but you can't put an epic in between two issues or vice versa. But the problem is that might increase the scope on the front end. So it's not I can say it's an obvious win from the back end. I can't say it's an obvious win overall. Is the problem there? So that's the current question, I guess.
I gotcha. That also adds a little bit of UX too, because it's going to be weird if you just can't drop something. It's going to be a little like they're going to want to know why. Yeah. And I'm wondering too, if you expand an epic and there are sub epics and issues in there, it's going to be also weird that you can't reorder that sub. Like, I don't know, we're gonna have to put like a big X or something over the part where you can't drag when you try and drop it. Not an X, that's horrible, but I've got to figure out some kind of interaction there. I'm wondering if in the future we should have maybe discussed this, or would there have been a way to find out that this was a blocker beforehand, like when it was suggested? Then some.
Yeah. So the thing is, I actually, like when I wrote my comment yesterday, I looked through the description and the comments, and I didn't see this listed as an explicit, like, this is a new thing we're allowing you to do. It was just kind of like an assumption, which is, it's a valid assumption. Like, it's in the designs and stuff. But like, what I mean is, because they're in the same list, we assume that you can reorder them with each other. But we didn't actually say, oh, we are suddenly allowing you to reorder them within, like, we just didn't sort of like flag that up like as a explicit thing. And it turns out that, like, from a back end perspective, that is quite complicated with the way we do ordering now. It's not something we can't do. It's just something that does increase the scope of the issue. And given that we've been working on this issue for quite a while, we probably should have noticed that sooner, as like a major flag rather than sort of a thing that we'll just try and deal with. I think from a back end perspective, like, I definitely have had a conversation with Charlie, not on the issue, I don't think, but somewhere, like either on Slack or in our one-to-one or somewhere else, where we mentioned this as, like, a thing that we were introducing, but we didn't go back to the issue and say, like, hey, we're introducing this. Should we be reintroducing this? Can we, like, it will significantly cut scope for the back end if we don't do this. So yeah, I think that's definitely a thing we could improve as well, is like to make sure that happens in the issue where people are actually following and can contribute.
Yeah, maybe next time when I was proposing these designs like months ago with the original designs, we could have highlighted the huge changes a little bit more, or even had a kickoff call for big features like this so that everyone's on the same page and understands how big the changes are, instead of just, that point being buried in the issue description. By the way, the ordering is changing drastically.
Yeah, I think even mentioning it in the issue description is fine as well. Like, I do expect people to, like, fully read the issue description, if not necessarily the entire comment thread, before they start working on something. So I think if it's in the description somewhere, like, it doesn't need to be like the most prominent thing. I just think it should be in there. Is a start anyway.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if some of this will be solved with the new product workflow too. Like, if we would have been able to catch some of these things more earlier. Especially, I don't know if we explicitly call out in the new product workflow, like, when technical feasibility testing occurs or experimentation occurs. But it would be nice to, and Gabe, you could probably talk to that a little bit, but it would be nice to have either a slotted workflow or some dedicated time for engineers to go in there and just test out some of the concepts that we've been talking about.
So is that, I mean, the product are doing a book club on what's it called? Inspired, is it, Gabe? Yeah, which is big on prototyping, right?
Yeah, prototyping and experimenting, and a lot of the workflow, I think that Scott wrote up came from a lot of the ideas in that book. I think, at least, it seems pretty closely related to it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I guess like I just noticed too in terms of looking at this specific issue and like process improvements as a whole is like there's another issue about making an epic tree on the roadmap view, and then we also have the roadmap tab in this like in the epic detail view, and then we have this drag and drop interface, and it's almost like if we had taken the time to go through some more of those like interactive prototyping and iterating and getting customer feedback and doing some of these like kind of experiments, which is the forward-looking process has some of that like problem validation, solution validation, and planning phases in there, but keep it lightweight so we don't spend like months doing it, but like weeks. I think it would have helped tease out a lot of these issues ahead of time. But I want us to get towards doing that because I think we'll eventually.
Which phase would that be in?
That would probably be in the solution validation phase, because what we're talking about right now is like people want to be able to see their, the epic relationships within an epic view. But looking back at the solution, we had a similar like situation or problem, but across different areas of the product. And so we designed a hyper-focused solution when we could have maybe like designed a more kind of general primitive for how this would work well across both like experiences, and just thinking through it, but then also doing some of the prototyping to tease it out like that will happen in the future when we do the problem and solution validation, and then getting into the planning stage, which is where there's a lot of cross-functional overlap between people talking about how can we break this down, how's this going to work, asking questions back and forth. So that's my 2 cents at least.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just to be clear, like this is the scope of conversation I was looking for. I'm not so much like interested in like, what should we do with this issue, as like, what do we do going forward? I think that's the more relevant thing here. So I think these are all great ideas. Anybody else got anything they want to talk about on that issue, the tree view one?
Just one other thing, Annabelle, I'm not sure if you've like heard of the idea of doing like CDOs, but I've used them with my teams really effectively, and it's more or less like sort of like a user flow diagram, but it's really lightweight. It's just what a user sees and what they do, and you kind of map out the happy and sad paths. And I think like we've used those at a conversational level even before we get into interface design, just to talk through like what is being built, what are the expectations from a user, and that has surfaced usually 95% of these weird use cases where, I didn't think about this particular thing, because you're more or less like looking at a 2D diagram of like things that the user can do, and then what happens after they do those things and take those actions. And maybe we could look towards something super lo-fi like that is like a starting point too, but I'll leave that up to the UX designers.
Yeah, we recently just got access to Mural to do these sort of user journey mappings, and I haven't actually had a chance to yet, but we have been doing these flows where, this is what the user is expected to do, here's what can happen if they don't do a certain step in the right direction, and that kind of stuff. So for the upcoming issues, that's something we'll definitely be doing.
Cool. I'm going to move on to the next issue. Actually, looking at this, I'm going to just sort of, Donald and Annabelle, feel free to jump in here, but I think that this one is actually more straightforward, and therefore we will learn less from it. But it looks to me like what happened here was like we worked I think the actual way we worked on this was pretty good. Like it was pretty decoupled. Like, Brett wrote back end, Rajat wrote front end. They were mostly separate. Like, they were mostly decoupled from each other and able to work on things independently, which is what we want. We don't want people to be too tightly coupled. We got things behind a feature flag, which is great. So like, we can turn it on if it's ready. There is a comment which I'm going to link to where we say it's going to be close for 12.1, but I think it's just going to slip because the front end's not going to be ready, which is fine. So that's the first time it slipped. And then the second time it slipped is not actually in the issue. But what happened was basically we ended up like with a lot of wasted time in the process, and I'm not 100% sure why that was. But like we verified it on staging. We turned on the feature flag on staging. We verified it there, and we realized that actually like this sort doesn't perform acceptably. So it was a pretty straightforward fix. We needed to add a database index, but by the time we realized that, we didn't have much time to do that before 12.1 was finished, and we weren't able to get it reviewed by a database reviewer in time. There's an item in the overall retrospective about making that easier. So like, hopefully the issues with reviews there won't happen. But as far as I can tell, for most of 12.1, we just weren't working on that. Like if we had found it sooner, we would have been able to work on it sooner. Anybody got anything you want to add there? Sorry,
I thought there was a note about the performance, but yeah, I'm going through it right now, and I can't see that note in there. But there was also a delay on the front end because in 12.0, I believe, when we first started working on this one, we were going through a little bit different prioritization of what engineers are working on. So I think it was bugs, tech debt, features. Mm-hmm. And I remember us having a lot of bugs and tech debt in that issue. So we actually didn't start working on this feature until close to the end, on the front end at least, close to the end of 12.0. So that's one reason. And we've adjusted it a little bit where we do a little bit more front loading of the planning of features to make sure at least there are eyes on these features from the beginning of a release. So I think that's one reason why it got moved, or why it got pushed from 12.0 to 12.1. I still can't find the performance issue.
I mentioned it briefly in the second comment I linked to, but I didn't actually follow up and say like, oh, hey, this didn't get like, merged. So maybe I mentioned it like in the MR or somewhere else, like where I pinged Eric, but like I can't find it in the issue itself, which I think is another improvement, like not maybe a major improvement. Sorry, later in 12.0, that was what you said.
Yeah, I was just going to add
that. Yeah, and then the second one, I think because we didn't have the front end like available to test, maybe that was it. But we should have still been able to. Well, I guess there wouldn't have been much point. I don't know. I'm very uncertain on like what we can learn from that one, except that we ended up not wasting, but like if we have tested that sooner, we would have been able to find the performance issue sooner. But also, if we'd been able to get the database review sooner, we'd have been able to get it in sooner as well. So yeah, sorry, I picked that one, but I think it's less interesting. Gabe, I don't know if you disagree there or.
No, I don't have a lot. I think that's all. I mean, sounds good to me.
Yeah. So
one thing to learn from that is just if we can limit, and we've already been kind of talking about it, but if we can limit our team-wide work in progress issues or features, I don't know, maybe that would help with that.
Yeah, Gabe, you mentioned this the other day, I think, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will be like I've gone through this with several teams before, and when we've implemented something like this, it breaks everything briefly because everybody's like, I can't work on this, I'm blocked, which is the right thing to have happen because we're enforcing a constraint on a system to like isolate where the weak link in the process is so we can go fix it. And then there's going to be another weak link somewhere and another weak link somewhere. But then eventually, like when you go through the process of fixing each of those things, you end up being able to go a lot faster in the long run. And then you end up increasing your throughput dramatically over like the course of time doing these like micro retrospectives. There's a whole idea too of like stopping the line, which is what Toyota introduced, where like anybody in the plant can pull on a chain and stop the entire assembly line if there's quality problems, which is another cool concept. And I think they do that like 3,000 times a day now still, which is crazy. But there's a lot of things I think to learn from that and that we can experiment with.
Cool. Annabelle, I don't think there was actually any UX change to this issue at any point, but is there anything like you wanted to add about this one?
Nope, I don't think so. It looks like I missed a response about Eric was, hang on, I'm trying to find the comment. Eric was a little apprehensive about users updating the order without realizing that they're going to change the order throughout GitLab. And I proposed.
You know what? Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, go on.
So Shane mentioned this in another issue, which I'm really having a hard time remembering which issue it was. Maybe Gabe will remember. So Shane mentioned something about how GitLab doesn't actually use the term backlog anywhere, or like grooming. Like it doesn't use Agile terminology within itself. And like we have a blog post describing this, but we don't have like user story documentation like in our docs about how to use GitLab for Agile, and like, you know, how this could be like, there could be a like backlog. This could be like a separate view at some point where like this could be like, you know, your backlog grooming view, like in Jira, where you have your I think it might just be called the grooming view. It's been so long since I used Jira for this stuff that I can't remember, but you know, where you order stuff. I don't know if you've used it more recently, Gabe.
It's been a while too, but yeah, I think we'll there's a lot of things that I want to explore, especially at our scale and how many issues we have that make it really difficult to to interact with in a meaningful way. So yeah, I think there's a lot that we can do there, and it's just hard to look at like what is the most common primitive we can do that is applicable to the most amount of people. But there is like a pretty big divide between people who do Scrum, which is the backlog approach, and the people who do Kanban, which is like the board type approach. And I think we need to continue to improve and look at how we can like satisfy those two groups.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but I do think it's interesting as well. Yeah, I think I'm going to try and find that comment and I'll send it to you on Slack or something, Annabelle, where Shane mentioned. It's in the board list capacity line issue. There you go. So if you look at that one, which I think Alexis has been mostly working on, I think he mentioned about like how we don't have Agile concepts like native in GitLab, and this could be a good candidate for one of those. So
it's even on our. There was another issue opened yesterday. That it's on our marketing site that we have backlog as a feature, but there's like nothing there.
And also, like, what is the feature like for back? Like, is it a list of issues? Like, you know, like what's the?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
I think that was mentioned in the plan channel.
Yeah, I found it, but it's on the feature comparison thing. I think there's a backlog management here. So it's listed there, and then it's also on the self-managed thing too. But product marketing, or I think somewhere for sales, like they have no idea what it does.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like as someone who works on this area, I'd be hard pressed to say like what the feature itself backlog is. So like what backlog management like necessarily, like, because we have a lot of primitives that you can do that with, but I don't know if we have one feature that I would say is backlog management necessarily.
Well, especially if it's only available on silver and gold. When was this added? Like, what is it? The issues list has existed since GitLab was created.
And it's in all editions. So yeah, that's a good point. So we're over time. I've got time after, but I don't want to go go too long. I assume everyone else has got time after because nobody's left. I don't actually think there's anything that we need to do from this that isn't already encapsulated in, stuff we are already talking about, or stuff that's already in Gabe's merge request that he's created about the. So Gabe's created a merge request, Annabelle, so like we have. Sorry, that sentence had about 3 starts. I'm just going to start again. We have like the back end plan team page, and we have the front end plan team page, and those describe how you work in those teams, but we don't have like a group wide plan page anywhere. So Gabe's adding a page for that describes sort of like stuff that applies to the group. And obviously when we split into 3 stages, which will be soon, team planning, portfolio management, and certify, most of these things will be common, but we might vary them a bit. So Gabe's doing that, putting together that MR, mapping it to the new product development flow that Scott created, all that stuff. So I think a lot of these things sort of fit with that, or with future iterations of that. I don't know if anybody feels like there's something we should take out of this beyond that. Maybe we should make a note about reweighting issues whenever they slip. Anyway, well, I think we should reweight up. I don't really like reweighting down. Like if an issue that's 3 slips slightly and it turns into a 1, I don't really care about that. I more care about like this issue that we thought was a 3 has turned into a 5 and we need to reevaluate it. Like
that is one specific thing that I think is like could be a process improvement, is that you regularly go through and like estimate something early to kind of rough size it, and then the person who picks it up might have a different take on it. And so I've also in the past, the teams that I've worked on, we'll go through and we'll do that kind of rough estimating, and then whoever is about to start it will look through it and then update the weight, because they're the ones who are going to be doing the work, and they might have a slightly different interpretation, experience set, background, tool set than the person who originally gave the weight. So that could just be one thing, is like as you pick a new issue up to implement it, just update the weight and make sure like you agree with it.
That's interesting. So for me, like in previously I've said I don't care about that, because I know that like somebody who's worked on this specific area before might find this a 2 and someone else might find it a 3, say. But like I don't care about that so much, because like I do want people to be able to take issues that are harder for them than they would be for other people, because otherwise you just have the same people working on like certain areas. But that doesn't mean I don't think we should do it. That's just giving the historical, like, what I've done in the past with this question.
Yeah, I don't think we should ever assign. I don't like the idea of assigning work to any person. I like, first in, first out, pull off the top. But it's just also like it's been a good sanity check, especially if something's been sitting for a while, like the situation has changed, to get like just an updated estimate. But we don't have to. Just we found that it's worked well in the past. So an idea.
Yeah, I think I like that, because it explicitly puts in kind of a check before we actually work on it to update weights. So even if we don't have it be the engineer or the person that takes it on reweights it, we should explicitly call out that, hey, before we actually commit to something in a release, or while we're evaluating what's in a release, we go through and check the weight for everything in there. Because I've had situations where things have been like a weight has just been thrown on a year before we start working on it, and then I don't even look at it because I see, oh, there's a weight in there, I already assume that it's right, and then we just go off of that weight as we build it, which is not good. But I think if we can figure out a way to explicitly ensure that we are always checking the weight before we get it into it, before the release starts, however we decide to do that, we should definitely do something.
So for me, when you pick up implementation, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I just care less about the weight and more about the understanding of the scope in general. So like someone picking this up might say, oh, hey, I see this was weighted as 2, but like, do we also need to consider this? Like, is this part of the scope or is this not? Like, maybe that's not clear. Like, this is a 3, but like, we're adding this thing, which in itself might be a 3 or bigger. Even ignoring the other part of this. So Yeah, for me, the conversation is more valuable, but obviously the conversation is qualitative and you can't measure it. So that's the problem with that. Annabelle, I see you added a couple of things to the doc. Do you want to speak about any of those?
I was just responding to some of the things I forgot to write down. I was also going to mention, Gabe, you mentioned roadmaps at some point, and I just commented, and I was trying to find my comment. One of the issues for 12.3 was going to be seeing child epics or child issues on the roadmap view. And we've got dozens of open roadmap issues, and we, probably you, me, and maybe Alexis too. Well, yeah, definitely Alexis too. Should probably just go through, maybe we'll need a meeting and go through the ones that we actually want to continue doing and figure out what we want roadmaps to be in the future, because there's so many little things that we have open that are, I think, already scheduled, and they might not all play well with each other. We might not need them all. Customers might not even want some of them, but we want to make sure that the roadmaps and the epics page are coherent and related in some way. And right now they're not really. So that issue that's planned for 12.3, I'm not sure. It's going to be UX only. And I think that UX is going to be figuring out what the next step is with roadmaps in general, rather than just implementing this feature.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I've been on a couple customer calls and this week and read some emails from customers, and there's a lot there that I think is worth unpacking, just so we have a coherent vision that we can communicate externally about where we're going. So I fully support that.
Cool. So I think for the kickoffs, Annabelle, in fact, I think for basically everything we've talked about here, like, I'm okay with trying this, but I don't think we necessarily need to make a handbook change in order to do it. Like, we can just say, like, okay, like, if we want to suggest to people they consider reweighting issues when they pick them up, we can sort of do that. Like, we don't have to do it everywhere to like get value from it. If we want to do kickoffs for some issues, we can do that, but I'll leave it up to the people who are working on that issue. Like, Annabelle, if you or Alexis feel like a kickoff's valuable, then, or feel like a kickoff would be valuable on an issue, then please like push for that. But also I'll let the backend team know that they can suggest that as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. It's just that I've worked with some, like Fatih almost always has a call with me before we start on an issue, and I love it. He has all these questions and we answer them, and then he'll show me his progress throughout the way. And then I just think it can be pretty valuable because I can spot things quickly. And we used to do this on the plan team meetings too. If Alexis and I, it's been a while, but if we continue to present our designs, and we've got a good mix of back-end and front-end developers on the call too, it's a good time to spot technical things that might come up or UX issues that might come up. The more people that see it, the better.
Yeah, the other thing is we have this slightly related, we have this convention of like channels that begin with F_, which are for specific features, and I don't feel like we've created many of those lately. Like, we've used existing ones, but we haven't created those. But maybe we should for like things like epic trees and stuff, where we know it's going to span. I think if we're working on anything that's an epic, we should probably consider creating a channel to match that, right? Because we know it's going to span a few releases, and we might want to have a place where we can discuss from that, separate from the main plan channel, which has like 100 people in it, I think. 127, yeah. So it gets quite noisy. But again, I don't think we need to like necessarily make a documentation change. It's just a thing we can think about in general. So yeah, I guess I'll just add these to the next plan weekly meeting as like things that we can consider doing, like kickoff calls, reweighting issues, feature channels. Was there something else? I feel like I'm missing something else. Well, if I am, add it to the plan related meetings agenda, and I'll put it on. We'll talk about it on Wednesday. But yeah, anything else from anybody?
Thank you for facilitating.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Right. Well, for all of you folks, it's, I guess, almost Friday afternoon, but for me, it's later on Friday afternoon. So this is my last call of the week. So have a good weekend, and I'll speak to you all next week.
Bye, Sean.